here we are, our final week of talking about sex. Now I know we've had some pretty heated discussion in small group about sex. And to be honest with you, great. It's important that we're talking about these issues in a safe environment where you can hear the truth. Because honestly, I know you're already talking about these things in your schools and everywhere you go. Well, this week, as we wrap up, I want to talk to you about what you're missing. That's right. You're missing out on one of the most wonderful experiences in your life, and that's sex. Great and godly sex. Now, you may be saying, how in the world can you put the name of God so closely associated with the word sex? Well, here's why. God created sex. That's right. He created it, one, for procreation, in other words, to make babies. And number two, He created sex to be a fulfilling and fun experience between a husband and a wife. He wants us to experience sex in a way that fully exploits the joy and the fulfillment that sex has to offer. I mean, great sex is a byproduct of a maximum intimate relationship between a husband and a wife. Now, I know that sounds really awkward here in church, right? And you may be giggling or feeling kind of grossed out about this whole thing about sex. But for years, you've been hearing the message to wait, right? And honestly, I know you're translating that into just another big no along with all the other no's that have been thrown your way. And when you get something that feels like a big fat no, you always will want to ask a certain question. Does anybody know what that one-worded question may be? Why? That's right, the word why. And it's okay to ask the question why. It's okay for you to say, why should I wait? And to give you an honest and truthful answer, purity paves the way to intimacy. So, what we are really asking you when we say to wait until marriage to have sex, we are asking you to remain pure. And I'm sure some of you are going to ask, why remain pure? What's the big advantage? What do I gain by remaining pure balanced against what I give up if I choose not to? Well, the answer to all three of these questions is found in the one word, intimacy. Intimacy is the joy of knowing someone fully and being known fully without fear of rejection because of impure acts or events in your life. In other words, it's having a relationship where trust, love, purity, and selflessness are at its core. So again, purity paves the way to intimacy. Now, when we talk about intimacy and sex in the same sentence, I have to clarify that we are talking about more than just a physical act. We are talking about a relational experience. And Satan has taken the relational aspect of sex right out of the equation. Satan would have you believe that it is like some sort of sporting event or an activity or something you do. I mean, I've known people who have had at least 15 to 20 sex partners before they graduated high school. Yeah, they thought they were a stud. But now, years later, they are fighting porn addictions, problems remaining faithful, and emotional baggage that they can't get rid of. And their relationships are always on rocky ground. See, from God's perspective, sex is highly relational. And when we forget that relational aspect, there will always be problems and consequences in those relationships. So right now, I want us to look at how God describes sex in the beginning. The Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh at that place. And the Lord God fashioned into a woman the rib that he had taken from the man, and brought her to the man. And the man said, "This is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." See, sex resulted in Adam and Eve becoming one flesh. They didn't just have sex. Something much more significant happened. They were united as one, because sex is relational. That is what God designed sex to be, relational. Now, let's look at what the Apostle Paul had to say about this in the New Testament. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ Himself? Shall I then take the members of Christ and unite them with a prostitute? Never. Do you not know that he who united himself with a prostitute is one with her? For it is said, the two will become one flesh. See, the notion of simply having sex is not only unbiblical, but it's impossible. When two people come together sexually, they become one flesh. They are united, not just physically, but relationally, emotionally, and spiritually. So, are the temporary pleasures derived from sex worth the long-term complications that it causes? Honestly, the pleasures that last for only a moment will cause a lifetime of pain, and it's just not worth it. So, you may be saying, okay, I think I'm getting it. Sex is an intimate act which is a byproduct of a relationship between a married couple. Okay, got it. But how do I start developing a lifestyle where I save sex for marriage? Well, here's how. Let me answer that question for you. Guys, I'm speaking to you. All the boys, all the men, all the males in the room. You want to ensure you have a great sex life with your spouse one day? Start learning how to honor and respect the women God has put in your life right now. Namely, your mother, your sisters, your aunts, your grandmothers, even the girls that are in this room. Now I know that may sound a little weird or kinky, but the best way is to learn how to love them right now. Remember, sex is a byproduct of a loving relationship in marriage. See, the idea of relationship is so important. Relational skills aren't magically given at the altar. They are learned over time, which means you have to get over the idea that women are simply objects to be enjoyed for your satisfaction. You can't love a woman for the way they make you feel. Rather, they are to be cherished, and you end up loving them for who they are. Honestly, this was hard for me to swallow even several years into my marriage. It wasn't until I understood this principle that I was able to love my wife for who she is rather than how she makes me feel. And because of that, we have an awesome relationship. Now girls, unlike the guys sitting around you, you tend to focus on the relational side of things, even if it's a temporary, fragile relationship. That is generally why it's so easy to bounce from guy to guy to guy. You are looking for the attention and the relationship of a guy who will pay attention to you. And that is what generally gets you into trouble. You are so determined to be in a relationship that you will allow a physical relationship to increase to the point that you start having sex. You are wired to look for the assurance of a commitment and that he really cares about you. Well, ladies, you want the assurance of a commitment? Find a guy who will love you for who you are. A guy who will cherish you and honor you and respect you and desire to remain pure. Then, when the time comes, when the marriage vows are exchanged, you can experience the wonderful intimacy of sex with no reservations and no regrets. So, as we wind up this series, we've looked at many aspects of sex, and what we found is that sex is a big deal, and Satan has been working overtime to try to educate you with lie after lie after lie. And the sad thing is, for this generation, the lies are told so much that many have believed them to be true. Now, you can dismiss everything we've told you about waiting and the reasons why it is so important to live a life of purity. But I can promise you this, you will end up paying the consequences. Look at what the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 18. Every other sin that a man commits is outside the body, but the immoral man sins against his own body. Guys and girls, listen, sexual sin is a big deal. It can ruin your life if not handled in the right arena, and that may be where some of you are at today. You've given in and fallen for the lies. Well, I want you to know that your life is not over. You can experience the intimacy God has to offer. You just have to forgive yourself and ask God to forgive you and live a life of purity from here on out. I know it's not going to be easy, but I can promise you it's worth it. So please, as we conclude this series, as we finish up in small group tonight, I want you to always remember the bottom line. Say it with me. You ready? Purity paves the way to intimacy. Students, you have to believe this. Not because I say so, not because your parents or your small group leaders say it. You have to believe it because it comes straight from God.